Okay, so now that we have our pitch block, we're going to come back here and we have our volute, and we're going to mark where to cut this volute with the pitch block. So what we do is we take this pitch block and we're going to slide it up underneath the volute here, and we're going to find the point that this pitch touches the volute, which is right here. Okay, call that the tangent point. Okay, so you find the tangent point, which is where this straight line touches this curved edge. Okay, so we know we want to cut it right there. Now we flip this over like this, I believe, and we'll find that tangent point, and now we're using the other side of this to mark where to cut it. Okay, so now that that's marked, we can go out to the saw and cut this on the saw, and that will be exactly where it needs to join up with the rail at this pitch. So now that we got this marked, we just line this up on our saw. We lay our volute here flat on the table, and then we let the blade cut exactly on that line that's right there, and that should give us a cut that we can fit to. Okay, so that will be the pitch to the stair. Okay, so when I'm setting a volute, you can see I'm using our pitch block, and I've just set our pitch block on here on the stair. That way I can move this volute up and down on that pitch block wherever it needs to go. And I come above it, and I'm looking at it, and I want the front of this volute to be maybe half an inch or 3/4 inch behind the front of the volute base, so it just curves around nice and clean around there. Okay, so I'm just kind of eyeballing that. I'm setting it up in the center of this run, and once I've got it over top of the base where I want it, I'm going to stick a level on here, and we're going to level the volute base out, and then we're going to measure how far from the bottom of our volute to the base. You want to measure that? So from the bottom here, what do we got?
5.38, 5.5.
So we'll go 5.5, we'll round up. So we're going to cut a block that's 5.5 inches tall, and then I'll show you what we do with it. Okay, so now we've cut a block to 5.5 inches. That block, if we were to set this on here now, this is going to join up at the right height with our handrail going up. But we need to figure out where this post is going to go. And the way I do that is your volute usually has a hole in the bottom. And so I want this hole in the bottom of this to line up with the center of the post. So I'll take just a little screw here, and there's already a center in there. And I'm just going to lightly thread that screw in there and leave the head sticking out just a little bit. So I'm going to thread it in a couple threads just so it holds in place and stays in the center. Okay. Now we got our post block marked, and we have the center of our post block. We're going to take and drill a hole that's the size of the head of this screw into this post block so it stays center. So you want to drill that hole for me? Okay. So now that is going to fit right there, and it's going to stay centered. And so when we set this on here, we can now move this where we want it and mark this post, and that will be the location of this volute. So again, I'm going to kind of come above it, and I'm going to scoot it back to where it was so that it follows the radius of the front of this. We want this right in the center of this edge, which looks like it needs to turn just a little bit to stay centered. And we might even, like for example, if we were to stick this on the side of here, we would want that. We want to make sure that this thing is going straight up. Which we can pretty much do with an eyeball because it's adjustable to some extent. Okay, so once we've done that, we kind of know that that's where this rail is going to connect. So now we need to square up this post. I would typically do that. So we kind of know we've got it sitting right here right now, but I want to make sure that that is square with this riser. So if I were to take and just mark, we're saying that that's about 5 11/16 or so. So if I come back here and mark 5 11/16, I just want to make sure that I'm square. And you can see I wasn't quite square. So this line here, that would ensure that I'm square with this riser. So if I put this back on here, just kind of come off and make sure it's on the block. There we go. Okay. So I put that back on there, spin that around. Now I can use that as my square line with my riser. Now I just need to make sure I'm going to come back over top, make sure I'm square with my rail here and centered. So I need to move this way just a little bit to center it. Okay. So now that I know the back of my post is square with this riser, and I know I've got my volute where I want it, I can now mark that post on all 4 sides. And now I know that that's where my post goes. And I know, because this block is 5.5 inches, I know however far my rail is going to go up, that post height will be that far plus 5.5 inches. So I can cut my post on the ground. So for example, do we have a short piece of rail? Just grab me that little, yeah. So this is the wrong rail, but just to give you the right idea. If we had this rail on here, and I want this rail to be, let's say 37 inches off the nosing. Right now, if I were to measure it, this is sitting right there. I'm gonna hold that right there. I could measure here, and I can see that I am 2.5 inches off the nosing. 2.5 inches. So I'm already 2.5. So if I want to be at 37, I need to go straight up 37 minus 2.5 inches. So I'd go 37 minus 2.5. That gives me 35, 34.5 inches. So this rail needs to come up 34.5 inches, which means this block will be 34.5 plus 5.5. That'll be 40 inches tall, is how tall that post is going to be. So I can cut that post, mount that post, set that post, and I know my rail is going to go where it's supposed to go. So once you've got your volute cut and you've got your block, the height that you want it, you can see we've set this rail on here. And you can adjust your cut before you ever put the rail up in the air while it's sitting down here. You can actually do your layout and transfer all your layout lines on the ground depending on how far you want to take it. So as you can see, we have a little gap here on the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust that cut right now on the ground before we stick it up in the air to make sure that fits. But once you've got that adjusted, you can drill your rail bowls and join your rail and can transfer all your lines and then raise the whole thing up with your post. What we've done here is we dry fit the volute. And we've kind of dry fit this rail. You'll see we got a post there. We've mounted the post in the center. We drilled a hole in the rail. We marked that on the ground. We mounted this bottom post, and we've just kind of checked everything to make sure it's working. So we'll throw some glue in there now. So we'll show you how we're going to do that. We're going to pull this off. Yeah, okay. And on these, there's multiple ways to do this, but I usually like to take a dowel screw, double-sided threaded screw, to put this together so I can kind of wrench it down. Now this is alder, so it's really soft, and it actually stripped out a little bit when we put it in. So we cut some shims. Where did I put that little shim? El shim. We're going to, yeah, okay. We're going to glue a little shim in here just to make it a little bit stronger when we join this together. So I'm going to break this piece of wood off inside there. And that's going to create some pressure in there as we spin this on because it's not very tight right now. So we're going to stick some glue on the top. That's probably too much glue. Be careful it squeezes out everywhere. So we're going to keep it kind of in the center here. And we've got this dowel screw. I'm going to stick that in the hole. And because we added that little piece on there, it's going to get a little tighter than it was as we screw that down on top of there. There we go. We're going to go one more turn. I'm going to pull that all the way around to here. And we got some glue squeezing out, so we know we have good contact. Now we're going to take this edge. We're going to stick some glue on this end. Tiene liquid nail o silicón para poner en el hoyo este. Rellenar un poquito alrededor. That's good. So we're just throwing a little glue inside that hole to make sure we got some glue up there. And now we can stick this up in the air. So we're going to stick that in here. Slide it down in where it's supposed to go. Now we'll put on our nut and washer inside our rail bolt here. It's always good, if possible, to leave your rail bolt running uphill because it makes it a lot easier to get the nut and washer on there. So you want to make sure your joint is nice and lined up as much as possible. All your details are right close. Again, the top's a little bit easier to sand out if you need to, but you want to make sure that the bottom details are lined up nice and straight. And then you can tighten that down. Okay. So now you got your joint all square. You can see there's usually a little bit of difference between your volute and your handrail, and that's normal, so you don't freak out. You can see it sticking out here like that. That's really not uncommon. So we're flush on one side and a little wide on the other side. You'll just come back and sand this in a little bit, sand your joint in where the details are off just slightly, and make it feel like it was never there. Okay? All right.